Hey there, dreamers. Welcome back to our channel. Before we drift into the classic journey of Dipper Pines from the show Gravity Falls, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see how far and wide our sleepy little community reaches. All right, without further ado, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. When you think of summers in Gravity Falls, your mind might wander to the towering trees, the sparkling rivers, and the secrets tucked into every corner of the strange little town. But for many of us, when we picture the warmest, brightest presence in that mysterious forest, it isn't the sunlight peeking through the pine needles, it's Mabel Pines. From the very first moment she bounded into the Mystery Shack, Mabel carried with her a kind of energy that could not be dimmed. Where her twin brother Dipper leaned into cautious observation, always searching for answers and solving puzzles, Mabel arrived with sweaters covered in colors, sparkles, and patterns no one had ever thought to combine before. She was a rainbow stitched into the deep green woods, and her laughter had a way of making even the strangest corners of Gravity Falls feel like home. Mabel was the kind of person who believed that every day held a secret surprise, sometimes in the form of a silly joke, other times hidden in the kindness she offered to others. When she spotted an opportunity to brighten the lives around her, she seized it, not with hesitation, but with unshakable enthusiasm. To Mabel, the summer wasn't just a season of adventure. It was a season of possibility, and she stepped into it with open arms. Her beginnings in Gravity Falls were filled with wide-eyed wonder. She didn't worry about what could go wrong or what dangers might lurk behind the town's many mysteries. Instead, she asked, what fun could be waiting just around the corner? And more often than not, her eagerness brought a smile to everyone who joined her, even in the most unexpected of situations. Where Dipper might have studied a map, searching carefully for clues, Mabel was already running ahead, chasing a trail of glitter, or an idea, or sometimes simply her own delight in being alive. That balance between Dipper's caution and Mabel's joy was part of what made the twins such a perfect pair. They were two sides of a coin, one guiding carefully, the other inspiring brightly. And yet Mabel's light wasn't just about her energy or her laughter. It was about her heart. She saw things not just as they were, but as they could be, wrapped in possibility. Where others saw a run-down shack filled with tourist trinkets, Mabel saw a home brimming with stories. Where others saw a summer away from friends, she saw a chance to knit new connections and discover new adventures. She was always, in her own way, ready to begin again. There's something especially comforting about Mabel's beginnings in Gravity Falls. They remind us that even in unfamiliar places with strange new challenges, there's always a way to create warmth. Mabel did it not by solving puzzles or battling monsters, but simply by being herself, unapologetically colorful, endlessly kind, and full of joy. As we follow her story tonight, we begin with this truth. The start of her summer wasn't just the beginning of adventures in Gravity Falls. It was also the beginning of a reminder for all of us that brightness can exist even in the most mysterious of places. So, as you get comfortable, perhaps tucked into your own blanket, imagine yourself stepping into that summer too. Imagine Mabel's voice calling cheerfully, her sweater patterns shining like small bursts of color against the quiet backdrop of the forest. The day may be ending, but for Mabel Pines, every evening was just the start of something new. When the Pines twins first arrived at the Mystery Shack, it wasn't immediately obvious what the summer would bring. To Dipper, the shack looked like a dusty old tourist trap, stuffed with curiosities and questionably authentic oddities. But to Mabel, even the flickering neon sign and squeaky floorboards seemed alive with possibility. She didn't see a scam-ridden roadside stop. She saw a stage for adventures waiting to unfold. Her first days were filled with delight in the simplest things. The musty smell of old wood, the cramped little attic where she and Dipper would stay, the strange trinkets sitting in corners. Mabel greeted all of it with enthusiasm. To her, even the peeling wallpaper and the slightly crooked windows were charming quirks, not flaws. She settled into the attic bedroom as if it were a palace, taping up her colorful posters, stringing lights where she could, and of course, filling drawers with her ever-growing collection of vibrant sweaters. It was in these beginnings that Mabel's spirit shone so clearly. She was someone who created comfort no matter where she was. She didn't need perfection to feel at home. She needed warmth, laughter, and the freedom to express herself. Soon enough, her cheerful decorations turned the attic into a little sanctuary of color above the odd and shadowy mystery shack. There's something quietly reassuring about the way Mabel found joy in details others might overlook. Where Dipper examined journal entries and worried about patterns in the woods, Mabel found happiness in stringing together beads, in doodling hearts and stars, and in planning what sweater she might wear the next day. While the mysteries of Gravity Falls seemed heavy and complex, she reminded everyone that even in the middle of strangeness, there could still be lightness. Her brightness didn't come from ignoring the oddities of the town. She noticed them, of course, but she chose to see them through a playful lens. A mysterious sound in the forest? Perhaps a monster, yes, but also, perhaps, a chance to meet a new friend. A strange artifact sitting in the shack's display room. To Dipper, it was a puzzle. To Mabel, it was an opportunity to weave a story, to imagine what strange and wonderful world it might have come from. That's the gift of beginnings. They hold the potential to be seen in different ways. Where one person sees uncertainty, another sees wonder, and Mabel, without question, saw wonder. She carried a sense of adventure that didn't demand answers, but welcomed experiences. In doing so, she reminded her brother and anyone who came near her that the first step into something new doesn't have to be intimidating. It can be joyful. So much of her first summer in Gravity Falls was shaped by that outlook. Even as strange events began to unfold, she treated them not with fear, but with curiosity and kindness. It set the stage for all the adventures to come, a reminder that the way you begin something often shapes the way you continue it. In the stillness of tonight, as we revisit Mabel's bright beginnings, we can take comfort in her way of seeing the world. There is always room to look at the unfamiliar and see possibility. There is always space to create color in the middle of mystery. Mabel lived that truth from her very first day in Gravity Falls, and in remembering her, we too can let that brightness settle gently into our own lives. There's something almost magical about the way Mabel's spirit balanced her brother's seriousness. Dipper would pore over pages of the mysterious journal, eyebrows furrowed, convinced that every shadow in Gravity Falls was hiding some dark truths. Meanwhile, Mabel might be perched upside down on the couch, knitting brightly colored yarn into something whimsical, humming cheerfully to herself and occasionally offering Dipper a snack or a silly comment to lighten his mood. To outsiders, it might have looked like distraction. But for Dipper, it was grounding. Mabel reminded him that while mysteries were important, so too were the small joys, the laughter, the comfort of family, the little bursts of silliness that made even the strangest day feel safe. It was her way of saying, yes, the world can be strange, but we can still smile while exploring it. Mabel's early days in Gravity Falls were full of moments like this, tiny bursts of brightness woven to larger, stranger adventures. While Dipper leaned toward caution, Mabel leaned toward connection. If there was a new person to meet, Mabel was already introducing herself with enthusiasm. If there was a pet wandering nearby, she was quick to kneel down, coo softly, and claim them as her new best friend. And if there was a party to be had, even if no one else thought of it, Mabel would find a way to make one. That eagerness made her summer different from what anyone expected. Gravity Falls wasn't just a place of mysteries and odd creatures. It was a playground for imagination. She painted the town in her own colors, bringing lightness into corners where shadows seemed heavy. And although her approach often contrasted with Dipper's, it was exactly that contrast that gave the twins strength. Because beginnings aren't just about places, they're about people. And Mabel's way of beginning the summer wasn't to focus on the unknown dangers of the forest. It was to focus on the joy of being with her brother, the delight of meeting new friends, and the fun of throwing herself into each day with her whole heart. Picture, for a moment, the attic room in the Mystery Shack during those early days. The quiet of the forest outside, the creaking of the shack's wooden beams, and inside, a small glow of light spilling across the room where Mabel was sketching silly doodles into her journal. Maybe she was giggling over an inside joke only she found funny. Maybe she was designing her next sweater with glitter glue and colored pencils. Whatever the case, she was always creating, always shaping her world into something warmer. That's what makes her beginnings so gentle to remember. Even in a place surrounded by secrets, she carried a comfort that was impossible to ignore. And if you close your eyes now, you might almost hear it. The faint scratching of her pencil across a page, the cozy rustle of yarn, and the soft hum of her voice as she drifted happily in her own colorful world. Those are the sounds of a beginning shaped not by fear, but by joy. A reminder that no matter where we find ourselves, we too can begin with lightness. As the summer stretched on, Mabel's way of approaching each day never wavered. Where some might have grown weary of the oddities or cautious of the unexplained, she leaned deeper into her natural enthusiasm. To her, every strange sound in the forest was another chance for an adventure. Every odd trinket in the shack was a treasure, and every new face was a potential friend. That's the gift of Mabel's beginnings. She treated them not as temporary moments to rush through, but as opportunities to live fully. She didn't see the summer as a waiting room before the school year began again. She saw it as a season where memories could bloom, where every laugh and every story mattered, and she wanted to fill it all with as much color as possible. Even the way she dressed was a reflection of this belief. Each sweater was a story, stitched together with brightness. Some had smiling animals, others glittering stars, and some were simply wild bursts of shapes and colors. She wore them proudly, never once dimming her love for the whimsical. In doing so, she quietly encouraged everyone around her to be a little braver in expressing themselves too. Those early days in Gravity Falls might not have seemed extraordinary on the surface. Siblings adjusting to a new place, learning its quirks, and making it their own. But when you look closely, you see the heart Mabel brought into it all. The attic, once just an old storage space, became a nest of laughter and color. The dusty rooms of the shack echoed with her jokes and playful energy. Even the mysteries themselves seemed softer when filtered through Mabel's warmth, as though the shadows weren't quite as dark because she was there to shine light on them. And so her beginnings remind us of something simple yet profound. The way we step into a new chapter shapes everything that follows. Mabel began her summer with laughter, curiosity, and kindness. She wasn't afraid to be herself, even in a town that was unlike anything she'd known. And because of that, the strange and sometimes frightening world of Gravity Falls became, for her, a place of wonder. As you settle more deeply into rest tonight, you might carry that reminder with you. The beginnings don't always need to be heavy or uncertain. They can be light, playful, and colorful, just like Mabel Pine's. They can be filled with laughter, doodles, and the quiet comfort of knowing that joy is something you can bring with you, no matter where you go. So imagine the attic of the shack one last time. The gentle creak of the wooden boards, the soft glow of a lamp, and Mabel tucking herself under a blanket covered in patterns and glitter. She smiles sleepily, Waddles not yet by her side, but already imagined into her dreams. Outside, the forest hums with mystery, but inside, Mabel is safe, wrapped in her own brightness, beginning a summer that will be remembered, not just for its strangeness, but for its joy. And with that, we close her first chapter. A chapter of bright beginnings, of sweaters and laughter, of turning a dusty attic into a home filled with light. A chapter that reminds us, as the night deepens, that sometimes the most powerful magic is the kind that makes us feel warm, safe, and ready to drift gently into dreams. If there is one symbol that perfectly captures Mabel Pine's spirit, it's her sweaters. Bright, glittery, patterned with llamas, kittens, shooting stars, or whatever captured her imagination that week. Her sweaters were more than clothes. They were tiny declarations of joy, stitched in color, and wrapped around her like a second skin. When Mabel wore a sweater, it wasn't just about warmth. It was about sharing a piece of herself with the world. Each one told a story, sometimes silly, sometimes heartfelt, but always full of life. To the casual eye, it may have seemed like nothing more than playful fashion. But to those who knew Mabel, every sweater was like a canvas, a cozy piece of art that carried her personality in every thread. Her love for sweaters began long before she arrived in Gravity Falls. Back home, she spent hours with yarn, needles, and an imagination that never seemed to slow down. But it was in the strange little town among the pines that her sweaters truly became part of her identity. The attic of the Mystery Shack soon held stacks of them, folded neatly or sometimes tossed carelessly across the room after an especially exciting day. Each sweater was different, no two ever the same, because Mabel never repeated a joy once it had been expressed. She was always chasing the next idea, the next burst of color, the next sparkle of fun. And what made them so special was that they weren't only for her. Mabel believed that sweaters were a way to spread happiness, not just to wear it. When someone she cared about seemed down, she was quick to pull out yarn and needles, declaring that what they really needed was a custom sweater. She had a gift for seeing people not just as they were, but as they could be captured in knit form, brightened, celebrated, wrapped in comfort. A sweater for Mabel wasn't simply clothing. It was a hug you could wear. Think for a moment of the quietness of that attic at night, the faint creak of the Mystery Shack settling into silence, the distant hum of crickets outside, and in the middle of it all, Mabel sitting cross-legged on the floor, a ball of yarn rolling at her feet. Her needles clicked softly in rhythm, her face glowing in the light of a small lamp. She might be humming a tune under her breath, lost in the simple comfort of creating. Stitch by stitch, row by row, she wove her joy into something tangible. There's a kind of magic in that, isn't there? The act of turning thread into warmth, color into comfort. Knitting was, for Mabel, more than a hobby. It was a way of saying, I care about you. I want you to feel cozy, safe, and loved. And while she may have been a child, the wisdom in that act is timeless. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is not words or even grand gestures, but simple, handmade tokens of love, gestures that say, "You matter to me," enough that I want to spend my time creating something just for you. Her sweaters became her way of moving through the world. They marked her presence before she even spoke. When people saw Mabel, they saw joy in motion. A girl who wasn't afraid of colors clashing or of standing out. In fact, she embraced it. Her style reminded everyone around her that there was nothing wrong with being bold, with being different, with wrapping yourself in the things that make you happy. As her summer in Gravity Falls unfolded, the sweaters became more than just clothing. They became symbols of her resilience, her optimism, and her boundless creativity. Even when mysteries grew darker, even when the forest seemed overwhelming, Mabel's sweaters stood as bright little lanterns, reminders that joy could still exist, stitched firmly against the chill of uncertainty. And so the story of Mabel's sweaters isn't really about fabric or glitter. It's about love. It's about hope. It's about a girl who believed that every day was a chance to create something that could bring comfort, whether to herself or to someone she loved. In those stitches, Mabel's heart was always present. And that made them so much more than clothing. They were little works of joy, woven into the fabric of her story. The beauty of Mabel's sweaters wasn't simply in their designs, but in the way she shared them. For Mabel, knitting wasn't an activity to keep her busy. It was a bridge between herself and the people around her. Every loop of yarn was a quiet expression of care. Every stitch a way of saying, "I see you, and I want you to feel special." Think of how she treated her friends. Candy and Grenda, her inseparable companions, were never just friends to Mabel. They were co-adventurers, partners in fun, and of course, worthy recipients of her sweater creations. If Candy admired a particular shade of yarn, Mabel remembered. If Grenda laughed at a silly design idea, Mabel made it real. She delighted in surprising her friends with gifts that weren't about fashion, but about love. Each sweater said, "You're important to me, and I want to wrap you in warmth." And then, of course, there was Waddles. The pig who stole Mabel's heart the moment she saw him became not only her loyal companion, but also her favorite sweater model. Tiny sweaters for Waddles, decorated with hearts, rainbows, or glittery patterns, weren't just jokes to Mabel. They were expressions of her joy in caring for someone small and sweet, a way to share her creativity with her closest friend. Seeing Waddles wiggle into a too-large sleeve or trot proudly in a colorful design always made Mabel laugh, and that laughter spread like warmth to everyone nearby. Even Dipper, her serious and often skeptical brother, wasn't immune to Mabel's sweater love. He might protest at first, embarrassed by some outrageous design, but Mabel knew that deep down he appreciated it. Because what her sweaters carried wasn't just yarn, it was intention. She poured time and thought into each one, and even if Dipper rolled his eyes, the truth was that wearing something his sister had made reminded him that he was loved. That's the secret behind Mabel's sweaters. They were more than just bright colors and bold designs. They were her language of affection. Where some people offered advice or gifts or even silence, Mabel offered sweaters. She offered something tangible, warm and lasting. In a world as unpredictable and strange as Gravity Falls, that mattered. Her sweaters were anchors, steady reminders that joy could be stitched into the fabric of daily life, no matter how odd things became. And it wasn't only about the finished sweater. The process itself was an act of peace. Imagine Mabel, sitting in the attic on a quiet evening, the faint buzz of cicadas outside, her lamp casting a golden glow across her yarn. The world outside could be filled with mysteries, but in that moment, She was safe, steady, and content. Each loop and knot was a rhythm, a soft heartbeat in thread form. To watch her knit was to see her joy unfold in real time, playful and calm all at once. Oh, there's something timeless about that image, a young girl creating with her hands, pouring love into something that will carry it forward. Knitting is slow. It asks for patience. It doesn't demand perfection, only consistency. And perhaps that's why Mabel was drawn to it. For all her wild energy and bursts of excitement, knitting gave her a quiet balance. It was a way to sit with herself, to settle into the flow of time, and to let her thoughts drift as her hands worked. She may not have realized it then, but those sweaters became a record of her summer. Each one held the memory of where she was when she made it, who she thought of, what laughter surrounded her. They were little diaries written, not in words, but in yarn, and when she wore them, she carried those memories close. So the sweaters of Mabel Pines weren't only bright decorations. They were living stories, stitched into wearable form. And in sharing them, she shared herself. In offering them, she said something gentle but powerful. I want you to feel the comfort I feel when I make these. I want you to know that you belong, that you're loved, and that you're part of my story. As the mysteries of Gravity Falls grew stranger and heavier, Mabel's sweaters became more than colorful expressions. They became shields. Not shields in the sense of armor against monsters or magic, but shields of spirit. Soft reminders that even in dark or frightening times, there was room for brightness. Whenever Dipper grew worried or the forest seemed too mysterious, Mabel's sweaters were like lanterns. A flash of glittery fabric, a goofy design, or a bold rainbow against the deep green backdrop of the pines carried with it a quiet strength. It was as if Mabel herself understood that facing the unknown required not just courage, but also comfort. And comfort is what she gave, not only to others, but also to herself. Think of the times when change weighed heavily on her heart. Mabel was not immune to doubt. She sometimes struggled with the idea of growing up, of losing the spark of childhood that she treasured so much. But when she pulled a sweater over her head, it was like wrapping herself in reassurance. Each design said, you don't have to let go of joy to face the future. You can carry it with you. The softness against her skin, the familiar colors around her shoulders, these were small but powerful anchors in moments when the world seemed uncertain. And perhaps that's why her sweaters meant so much to those around her. They weren't perfect. Some were lopsided. Some had threads sticking out. Some glimmered with too much glitter. But that imperfection was the point. They were human, handmade, touched by love. They reminded everyone that you don't need to be flawless to be meaningful. You just need to be honest and full of care. In many ways, Mabel's sweaters mirrored her personality. She wasn't afraid of clashing colors, just as she wasn't afraid of clashing ideas. She wasn't shy about glitter or sparkle, just as she wasn't shy about showing her emotions, and she wasn't embarrassed by silly patterns or over-the-top designs, just as she wasn't embarrassed to laugh loudly, hug tightly, or live fully. The sweaters were her truest reflection, bright, bold, unapologetically herself. Imagine for a moment the scene of Mabel pulling a freshly finished sweater over her head. Her eyes light up, her smile wide, as she twirls in front of Dipper or Grunkle Stan. She doesn't wait for approval, though it always comes in some form, whether laughter, an eye roll, or genuine admiration. She wears her joy immediately, not locking it away, but showing the world that happiness is meant to be shared. And it's in those little displays that the real magic of the sweaters lives. They weren't locked behind glass in the Mystery Shack as curiosities. They weren't treasures to be saved for special occasions. They were part of the everyday, woven into the fabric of ordinary life. And that's what made them so comforting. They whispered a quiet truth. Joy doesn't need to be rare or reserved. It can live in the simple act of wearing something that makes you smile. Even when Gravity Falls seemed overwhelming, when shadows stretched longer or mysteries grew darker, Mabel's sweaters reminded her and everyone around her that joy wasn't gone. It was right there, stitched close to the heart, glowing softly against the unknown. That's why the sweater of joy isn't just one design or one memory. It's all of them together. The rainbow of Mabel's creations, each carrying a piece of her light. And in remembering them, we remember her lesson, that warmth and joy can be chosen, created, and shared even in the strangest of places. By the time Summer in Gravity Falls unfolded into its most mysterious chapters, Mabel's sweaters had become inseparable from her story. They weren't just outfits for the day. They were her way of carrying light wherever she went. Each sweater held a memory, and each memory was a thread in the larger tapestry of her life. The shooting star sweater, glittering across the front, spoke of her boundless imagination and her belief in possibilities. The animal sweaters, whether kittens, llamas, or even unicorns, spoke of her love for creatures big and small, and the joy she found in celebrating them. The simple, bright patterns carried echoes of laughter shared with friends, of afternoons spent doodling ideas before picking up her needles and yarn. Each one was a snapshot, a reminder of moments she cherished. And when she wore them, she wasn't just keeping herself warm. She was wrapping herself in those memories, letting them rest against her heart, reminding her that no matter what challenges came, joy had always been part of her journey. What makes this story so comforting is the way Mabel's sweaters remind us of our own keepsakes. We all have little things that hold memory and meaning, perhaps a blanket from childhood, a scarf given by someone we love, or a worn-out shirt we can't let go of because it feels like home. These things are more than fabric. They are touchstones of comfort. They tell us that love can be held, carried, and remembered. Mabel, without realizing it, created those touchstones for herself and for others. Every sweater was her way of saying, I want this moment, this laughter, this love to last. And by weaving them into yarn, she gave them a kind of permanence. Long after a day ended, the sweater remained. Long after a joke faded into memory, the design stood as a reminder of joy. Picture the end of a long summer day. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft lavender glow over the trees. The Mystery Shack is quieting down, its strange exhibits tucked into shadow. Upstairs in the attic, Mabel pulls on one of her sweaters. She hugs it close, maybe twirls once in front of the mirror, then flops onto her bed with a sigh of contentment. Waddles climbs up beside her, curling against her side. The sweater is warm, the blankets are soft, and the night outside feels just a little less mysterious because she has wrapped herself in her own joy. That image is the heart of this segment. Because sweaters for Mabel were never about hiding. They were about shining. They were never about covering herself up, but about revealing who she was, boldly and kindly, for all to see. In every stitch she told the world, I am here. I am happy. And I want to share that happiness with you. So when we remember the sweater of joy, we are not remembering a single piece of clothing. We are remembering a practice, a way of life, a small but powerful act of choosing to carry warmth into every day. We are remembering a girl who believed in color, in sparkle, in laughter, and who believed that the best way to live was to spread those things to others. As the night deepens and you settle further into rest, let Mabel's sweaters remind you that joy is not distant. It can be made, stitched together with patience and love. It can be carried in fabric or in memory as a gentle warmth close to the heart. And it can be shared quietly and simply in ways that leave the world just a little brighter. With that thought, the segment closes softly. Mabel in her sweater, the attic lamp dimming, Waddles snuggled at her side. Outside the crickets sing and the forest hums. But inside there is only warmth, comfort, and peace. The sweater of joy has done its work. And now, like Mabel, you can drift gently into dreams wrapped in your own small comforts. If you had to choose one word to describe Mabel Pines beyond her joy, it might be loyalty. Beneath the glitter, the sweaters, and the laughter, there was a heart that held fiercely to the people she loved. For all her playfulness, Mabel was never careless with her relationships. She may have teased, she may have distracted, she may have drifted into her own imaginative worlds. But when it truly mattered, she was there. Always. The clearest reflection of this loyalty was her bond with Dipper. Twins share a closeness that is unique, and for Mabel and Dipper, that bond was the center of their summer. They were opposites in many ways, he cautious, she carefree. But that contrast never pushed them apart. Instead, it tied them together, each filling the spaces the other left open. Dipper might have been the one searching for answers, the one warning of danger and urging caution. But Mabel was the one reminding him not to lose sight of joy. And just as importantly, when Dipper faltered, when he doubted himself, Mabel was there to catch him. She could tease him for being overly serious, but she also saw his worth more clearly than anyone. She believed in him, sometimes more than he believed in himself. And Dipper, in turn, believed in her. Their loyalty wasn't one-sided. It was a shared devotion, even if it showed itself differently. Where Dipper's loyalty often looked like protection, Mabel's loyalty looked like encouragement. Where he built safety by gathering knowledge, she built safety by building joy. Together they created a balance that neither could have managed alone. There's a kind of comfort in remembering that. Because loyalty doesn't have to look the same for everyone. It doesn't always mean guarding with a shield or fighting battles. Sometimes loyalty is laughter at the right moment. Sometimes it's standing close when someone feels alone. Sometimes it's refusing to let go even when everything around you feels uncertain. Mabel embodied that kind of loyalty, and she didn't measure it in grand gestures. She measured it in presence. When Dipper sat buried in journals and maps, Mabel stayed close, offering little breaks, silly doodles, or a sweater to soften his seriousness. When Waddles entered her life, her loyalty extended to him instantly. She didn't just adopt a pet. She adopted a companion, a friend who would always be by her side. And then there were Candy and Grenda. From the moment they bonded, Mabel's loyalty to her friends was absolute. She celebrated their quirks, defended them fiercely, and made sure they knew they were cherished. To Mabel, friendship wasn't something casual, it was something sacred. Once she gave her heart to someone, she gave it fully. This loyalty wasn't loud or dramatic most of the time. It was soft. It was steady. It was the way Mabel held space for the people she cared about, even in her own silly, sparkling way. And in the strange, unpredictable world of Gravity Falls, that kind of loyalty was a light you could count on. So when we think of Mabel as a loyal sister and friend, we think not just of moments where she stood beside Dipper in battles, or when she protected Waddles from being taken away. We think of the quieter moments, the late-night talks in the attic, the laughter shared over small things, the simple comfort of knowing she was always there. Because Mabel didn't just promise loyalty, She lived it, every day, in ways both small and unforgettable. When we think of loyalty, it's easy to picture dramatic moments, sacrifices, rescues, grand declarations of devotion. And while Mabel certainly had her shining, heroic moments, the core of her loyalty to Dipper was built in the quiet. It wasn't always the battles they faced together, but the late-night conversations in the attic, the whispered reassurances under the soft glow of a lamp, or the way she never let him disappear into his own worries for too long. Dipper was often drawn toward responsibility, sometimes to the point of anxiety. He worried about mysteries, about dangers, about the future that felt heavy even for someone his age. And it was in those moments that Mabel's loyalty became a lifeline. She reminded him of balance, not dismissing his concerns, but gently nudging him back toward joy when the weight of his seriousness grew too much. Imagine one of those nights in the attic. The crickets are singing outside, and the shadows are long across the wooden walls, and Dipper is hunched over the journal, scribbling notes about some strange creature in the forest. Mabel, sprawled on her bed with the Waddles at her side, watches him for a while. Then she bounces up, crosses the room, and drapes a freshly knitted sweater over his shoulders. "You'll think better if you're cozy," she says with a grin. It's playful, but it's also deeply caring. It's her way of saying, "You don't have to carry this alone." Moments like those revealed her understanding of Dipper in ways that went beyond words. She knew he needed her laughter as much as she needed his caution. She knew that in a place as strange as Gravity Falls, loyalty wasn't just about fighting back-to-back against the unknown. It was about making sure neither of them forgot who they were. But loyalty, as Mabel showed, also meant honesty. She didn't blindly agree with Dipper on everything. Sometimes she disagreed, firmly, even stubbornly. She stood her ground when she believed in something, even if it meant conflict. Yet even in those clashes, the foundation of loyalty never cracked. Because her devotion wasn't about convenience. It was about being true, being present, staying connected, even through differences. That is what made their sibling bond so powerful. They were not carbon copies of one another. They didn't see the world the same way. But they chose again and again to stand together. And for Mabel, standing together didn't mean becoming someone else for Dipper's sake. It meant bringing her whole self, her glitter, her imagination, her laughter, into his world and reminding him that those things were as valuable as his search for answers. There's something soothing about that idea, that loyalty doesn't require us to change who we are. Instead, it asks us to bring the truest parts of ourselves to the people we love, so that together we can be stronger. Mabel embodied that truth. She didn't quiet her joy for Dipper's seriousness. She balanced it with her own brightness. She didn't retreat when he grew overwhelmed. She leaned closer, offering her presence as a steadying force. Think of the many times they faced uncertainty, the strange lights in the forest, the riddles in the journal, the dangers that seemed too large for two kids to handle. Through it all, Mabel's loyalty whispered the same message. You are not alone. I'm here with you. And that, more than any sweater or joke or smile, was her greatest gift to her brother. If Dipper was the center of Mabel's loyalty, Waddles was its heart. The moment she won that pudgy little pig at the fair, something inside her clicked. To anyone else, he might have looked like just an ordinary farm animal, funny, clumsy, maybe a little smelly, but to Mabel he was family. In that instant, she decided that Waddles wasn't just her pet. He was her companion, her confidant, her soft and snorting source of unconditional love. Loyalty to Waddles was never negotiable. She carried him in her arms, fed him treats, and included him in adventures whether or not he really understood what was happening. But more than that, she defended him fiercely. The world might not always understand why a pig belonged in the heart of every adventure, but Mabel never questioned it. Waddles belonged because she loved him, and that love was enough. Think of the times when someone suggested giving him up or when circumstances threatened to separate them. Mabel's response was always firm, even desperate. She would not abandon Waddles. To her, loyalty meant permanence. Once she gave her love, she did not take it back. That's why Waddles remained by her side, waddling faithfully along, a reminder that true loyalty includes even the quietest companions. But Mabel's loyalty extended far beyond her pig. When she bonded with Candy and Grenda, she poured the same devotion into those friendships. The three of them made an unlikely trio at first. Mabel with her boundless imagination, Candy with her dry humor and quirks, Grenda with her booming voice and fearless honesty. Yet Mabel saw something precious in both of them. She didn't just enjoy their company, she celebrated them. That celebration was the essence of her loyalty. With Candy, she embraced the quirks others might overlook. With Grenda, she adored the boldness that others sometimes misunderstood. Mabel's loyalty wasn't about ignoring flaws. It was about honoring uniqueness. She made her friends feel seen, and in doing so, she bound herself to them with a kind of affection that outlasted any summer day. What makes this loyalty so remarkable is how effortless it seemed for her. Mabel didn't weigh the value of her friends or calculate what she gained from them. She simply decided, "These are my people, and I will stand with them." In a world filled with strange creatures and looming mysteries, she made the choice to prioritize laughter, friendship, and love. That choice was her loyalty in action. And it wasn't just about defense or protection. Her loyalty showed itself in joy. When Candy and Grenda joined her in silly schemes, she laughed the loudest. When Waddles sat beside her, she hugged him as if nothing in the world could be better. Her loyalty wasn't only about being there in the hard times. It was about cherishing the good times with everything she had. That, perhaps, is the most comforting part of Mabel's story. Loyalty doesn't always need to be proven in battles or struggles. Sometimes it shines brightest in the fun, in the silliness, in the laughter that builds bonds too strong to break. Mabel's loyalty was joyful, unshakable, and simple. Once she called you her friend or her pig, she meant it for life. Loyalty shines brightest when it's tested, and for Mabel, there were moments in Gravity Falls when her devotion faced real strain. Being a loyal sister and friend didn't always mean things were easy. In fact, the challenges she faced made her loyalty more meaningful. Because it was not blind or simple, it was chosen, again and again, even when it hurt. One of the hardest trials came in her relationship with Dipper. For all their closeness, they were still two different people, with different dreams and fears. Dipper longed for answers, knowledge, and responsibility. Mabel longed for joy, connection, and the feeling that childhood magic didn't have to fade. Those desires sometimes collided, and in those moments, Mabel's loyalty wasn't about always agreeing. It was about staying tethered, even when disagreements pulled them in opposite directions. There were nights when Mabel worried that Dipper would leave her behind, pulled by mysteries too big for her laughter to lighten. And there were times when Dipper feared Mabel didn't understand the seriousness of their challenges. But no matter the fear, the bond never broke. Even in moments of separation, the thread of loyalty held fast. And when they reunited, it was stronger than before, because real loyalty bends, but it does not snap. The same was true with her friends. Candy and Grenda weren't just companions for the easy days. They stood with her in awkward moments, embarrassing crushes, and wild adventures. But there were times when their friendship had to weather little storms, jealousies, insecurities, misunderstandings. And each time, Mabel chose not to let those moments define their bond. She leaned into forgiveness, into laughter, into loyalty that said, "Our friendship is bigger than our mistakes." Her loyalty was tested most deeply when she faced the idea of change. Growing up felt to Mabel like a kind of loss. It meant uncertainty, separation, and the possibility of leaving behind the people and the comforts she loved most. But even then, loyalty guided her. When she feared the future, she clung tighter to Dipper, to Waddles, to Candy and Grenda. She reminded herself and them that love is not something that fades with time. It grows, it stretches, it follows us, even into the unknown. And that is where Mabel's loyalty becomes more than a character trait. It becomes a lesson. Loyalty is not about holding people so tightly that they cannot move. It is about promising that no matter where they go, your bond will remain. Mabel showed this through her laughter, her sweaters, her hugs, and her unwavering belief in the people around her. She was a loyal sister because she believed in Dipper even when he doubted himself. She was a loyal friend because she saw Candy, Grenda, and Waddles not as side characters in her story, but as family in their own right. As the summer wound down and the mysteries grew darker, it was Mabel's loyalty that anchored everyone. Through fear, through conflict, through change, she held her people close. And when the final days came, when choices had to be made and sacrifices had to be weighed, her loyalty did not falter. It carried her forward, and it carried them forward too. So when we remember Mabel as a loyal sister and friend, we are remembering a girl whose devotion was not fragile. It was playful, it was joyful, it was stubborn, and it was strong. She taught us that loyalty isn't about never disagreeing or never feeling afraid. It's about choosing love again and again in every small and great moment. And as you settle now into your own rest, let that thought be a comfort. Think of Mabel in the attic, Dipper nearby, Waddles snoring softly at the foot of her bed, Candy and Grenda giggling in memory of the day's adventures. They are safe together, held close by her loyalty. And in that image, you too can find peace, knowing that bonds built on love endure, even through the strangest of summers, even through the mysteries of life, even through the quiet of nights. Imagination is like a lantern in the dark. It glows softly, it wanders freely, and it lights up places that the ordinary world sometimes overlooks. For Mabel Pines, imagination was not just a passing thought or a childlike distraction. It was the very core of how she saw life. In Gravity Falls, a place already filled with mysteries and wonders, her imagination blossomed even brighter. She didn't just observe the strange things that happened. She built worlds of her own, stitching them together with laughter, glitter, and boundless creativity. From the very first days of summer, Mabel revealed her gift for dreaming beyond the moment. Where Dipper saw an attic filled with old boxes and creaky wood, Mabel saw a stage, a palace, or a secret hideout. Where others saw a forest filled with shadows, she pictured kingdoms where unicorns roamed and fairy tale creatures whispered secrets. Imagination for her was not a separate world. It was layered on top of reality, blending seamlessly so that every moment became richer, warmer, and more alive. One of her simplest but most enduring acts of imagination was storytelling. She would take the ordinary events of a day and retell them with a sparkle of exaggeration. A walk through the forest could become an epic quest. A trip to the diner could be transformed into a banquet worthy of royalty. With every word, she drew people in, not to deceive them, but to remind them of the magic that hides in plain sight. To Mabel, every moment had the potential to become a story worth remembering. Her creativity found its way into crafts as well. Sweaters, of course, were her favorite canvas, but beyond knitting, Mabel decorated, painted, and glued together little worlds of color and texture. Glitter was her constant ally. Stickers, sequins, and bright ribbons were tools she wielded with delight. Each creation might have looked silly or over the top to someone else, but to Mabel they were evidence of the imagination spilling out of her mind. Each craft said, "I see the world differently, and I want to share that with you." And she didn't keep her imagination to herself. That's what made it so magical. She invited others into her worlds: Dipper, Waddles, Grunkle Stan, Suze, Wendy, Candy, Grenda. She pulled them into crafts, games, and stories, whether they rolled their eyes or joined in with laughter. She knew that imagination was better when shared because it transformed not just her own day, but the days of those around her. Even the most serious moments could be softened with her touch of wonder. Imagine one evening in the attic. Dipper hunched over his journal, the weight of mysteries pressing down on him. The lamp glows dimly. The pages are heavy with scribbled notes, and silence fills the room. Then, from across the space, Mabel leaps up and announces that the attic has been transformed into a pirate ship. She ties a scarf around her head, makes Waddles the captain, and insists that Dipper is her first mate. At first, Dipper groans, but slowly, inevitably, he smiles. For a little while, the mysteries fade, replaced by laughter and adventure, spun out of Mabel's imagination. That is the kind of magic she carried. Her imagination wasn't an escape from reality. It was a way to embrace it more fully. When things grew frightening, she colored the shadows with stars. When days felt heavy, she lightened them with sparkle. Her imagination said, "You don't have to ignore the hard parts of life, but you can choose to see more than the fear. You can choose to see the wonder, too." And that's why Mabel's imagination was such a powerful gift. It reminded everyone that even in a world full of strange mysteries, monsters, and challenges, joy could be created. Laughter could be woven into the fabric of the day, and even the darkest night could be warmed by the glow of creativity. Imagination for Mabel was not something that flickered only in quiet moments. It was a current that flowed through everything she touched. Wherever she went, her creativity followed, changing the atmosphere like a lantern that casts colorful light. Friends felt it most strongly because when Mabel dreamed, she dreamed with others in mind. She wanted everyone to feel included in her worlds of wonder. Take Candy and Grenda, for example. Their friendship was strong on its own, but Mabel's imagination often gave it an extra spark. She would spin plans for adventures that seemed wild at first, like throwing an extravagant sleepover in the Mystery Shack or pretending that the woods behind the cabin were enchanted gardens. Candy, with her dry humor, might raise an eyebrow. Grenda, with her booming laugh, might immediately join in. But no matter their reactions, Mabel's imagination pulled them closer, weaving them into shared stories that deepened their bond. Even the silliest activities, crafting papier-mâché masks, inventing new games, or creating elaborate storylines for pretend worlds, became unforgettable because of the joy they carried. Mabel's friends never had to wonder if life would feel dull around her. They knew that even a rainy day, when the world outside looked gray, could become vibrant within her imagination. A rainstorm might turn into a mermaid adventure. A puddle could be a portal. Her loyalty to her friends meant she gave them not only her time, but also her creativity, offering them entire landscapes of fun and possibility. Her imagination also brought comfort during the scarier moments in Gravity Falls. When the mysteries turned eerie, when strange creatures roamed the woods or shadows lingered too long, Mabel used her creativity as a shield, not to deny the fear, but to soften it. She could laugh in the face of something strange, inventing a silly nickname for a monster or imagining it secretly loved to dance. This humor, born of imagination, reminded those around her that even danger could be met with light-hearted courage. Grunkle Stan, often gruff and practical, sometimes rolled his eyes at her flights of fancy. Yet even he wasn't immune to her influence. Her crafts decorated the shack. Her playful stories livened dinners that might otherwise have been silent. And in his own quiet way, Stan seemed to appreciate how Mabel's imagination kept the shack from being only a place of oddities. It became a home, warm and filled with personality. And then there was Seuss, whose childlike wonder made him especially receptive to Mabel's creativity. Together, they could lose themselves in games and crafts that blended reality with pretend. For Seuss, who carried his own quiet burdens, Mabel's imagination was like an invitation to return to the joy of childhood, without judgment or restraint. She gave him not just laughter, but permission to dream. Even Wendy, cool and laid back, found herself occasionally swept into Mabel's imaginative schemes. Whether it was a spontaneous costume idea or a silly nickname, Mabel's energy softened Wendy's aloofness, drawing her into the fun. That was the beauty of Mabel's creativity. It crossed barriers, age, temperament, mood, it didn't matter. Her imagination was a bridge, inviting everyone to step into a brighter version of the moment. Imagination, when shared, becomes something larger than the person who dreams it. For Mabel, it was never about escaping the real world. It was about enhancing it, filling it with color and meaning. Her friends might have thought they were just playing along, but in truth, they were being reminded of a simple but profound truth. Life is richer when we let ourselves imagine. And in Gravity Falls, a place already overflowing with the bizarre and the magical, Mabel's imagination still managed to add something unique. Because while the mysteries were strange, her creativity was personal. It wasn't about ancient secrets or cosmic forces. It was about laughter, joy, and connection. That's why her friends loved her world so much. They weren't just fantastical, they were warm, safe, and built with love. Imagination is a gift, but like all gifts, it can carry its own challenges. For Mabel, dreaming brightly often meant she painted the world in vivid colors that reality could not always match. She pictured moments playing out perfectly, friendships without friction, adventures always ending in joy. But life, even in the magical town of Gravity Falls, didn't always follow the script of her imagination. One example was her boundless hope in people. Mabel believed, often instinctively, that kindness and fun could reach anyone. She would craft elaborate scenarios of friendship where even the most difficult person would eventually join in. Sometimes that optimism paid off. She turned awkward encounters into warm bonds. But at other times, she faced disappointment. Not every person was ready to step into her colorful world. Some resisted, some walked away, and some proved untrustworthy. For Mabel, those moments could feel like the sharp contrast of black ink spilled across a bright drawing. And yet her imagination gave her resilience. Even when plans collapsed or hopes were dashed, she found ways to reframe the story. If someone hurt her feelings, she might imagine them as a grumpy character in a fairy tale, whose heart could soften someday. If a day felt heavy, she could picture it as a puzzle piece in a bigger, more hopeful story. This didn't erase the pain, but it helped her carry it with grace. Her imagination acted like a safety net, softening the falls of disappointment. The same pattern appeared in her adventures. Mabel loved to dream of victories and happy endings. She imagined herself and Dipper conquering mysteries, celebrated as heroes, and often they did succeed. But there were times when their plans unraveled, when danger was too real, when fear pressed in. In those moments, her imagination did not abandon her. Instead, it adapted. She could picture the fear itself as something less overwhelming. Monsters became silly. Tension turned into opportunity for bravery. Her creativity became a way to steady herself and others, even in the unknown. But perhaps the most striking clash between imagination and reality came during her longing for the perfect summer. In her heart, Mabel painted a picture of endless sunshine, new friendships, and carefree adventures. She saw the season as a glittering jewel where everything would fall into place. And while many moments lived up to her hopes, others did not. There were conflicts, disappointments, even heartbreaks. Those moments threatened to tear through the bright image she had built. Still, Mabel's imagination was not fragile. It was flexible. When her vision cracked, she filled the gaps with new colors, new shapes. She found joy in unexpected places, weaving fun out of scraps of disappointment. Where Dipper saw problems to solve, Mabel often saw opportunities to reimagine. It was this ability to keep dreaming, even when reality faltered, that made her imagination such a powerful force. Yet imagination also taught her important lessons about balance. She learned that while dreams were essential, they had to live alongside reality. She discovered that sometimes people needed her not to turn pain into a joke, but to simply sit with them in it. Sometimes problems couldn't be glittered over. They had to be faced honestly. And though that was hard for Mabel, she grew stronger for it. Her imagination didn't fade, it matured, becoming not just a source of joy, but also a source of wisdom. What made Mabel's imagination so magical was that it didn't close her off from the real world. It connected her more deeply to it. Even when reality broke through her fantasies, she found a way to keep dreaming. The combination of innocence and resilience gave her a rare kind of strength, the ability to see beauty even in imperfection. That strength didn't erase the difficulties she faced, but it made her someone others could rely on, not just for laughter, but for light in the darker moments. The true magic of imagination is that it doesn't end when the game stops, or when the craft is put away, or when the story pauses. Its effects linger, shaping the way people feel, remember, and even hope. For Mabel Pines, imagination was more than a pastime. It was a gift she left with everyone she touched, one that stretched far beyond a single summer in Gravity Falls. Her attic bedroom, for example, became more than just a room because of her creativity. With sweaters draped over chairs, glitter scattered across desks, and crafts filling every shelf, it turned into a world alive with color and warmth. Dipper might have called it messy, but in truth, it was alive with her spirit. That space was a reflection of how she saw the world, not plain but bright, not ordinary but full of potential. And in time, others who stepped inside felt that too. Friends found comfort there, and even Grunkle Stan sometimes softened when he walked into the glow of Mabel's creations. Mabel's imagination also made its way into the stories people carried about her. Candy and Grenda would remember not just her laughter, but the fantastical world she spun for them. Suze would recall not just afternoons at the shack, but adventures that felt larger than life because Mabel gave them that sparkle. Even Dipper, ever the serious twin, would treasure the way she turned their mysteries into memories filled with light, keeping their journey from sinking into only fear and duty. Her imagination was a thread. woven into the tapestry of their lives. And there was something healing in that gift. When others felt worn down, Mabel's creativity reminded them that joy was still possible. She had a way of finding magic in the smallest details: a funny sticker, a doodle on a notebook, a sweater stitched with care. These little touches whispered a gentle truth. The world is heavy sometimes, but it is also endlessly capable of delight. Through her imagination, she taught others to look for those moments, to see not just what is, but what could be. Even after the summer would one day end, her gift would continue. Dipper, facing challenges of his own, would carry with him the memory of Mabel's endless creativity, reminding him that not every problem needed to be solved with logic. Sometimes it needed laughter or a new way of seeing. Her friends, scattered across their own paths, would remember the girl who brought color into every corner of life. And Gravity Falls itself, a town already unusual, would seem even brighter in the memory of Mabel Pines, whose imagination matched the strangeness of the place with joy and wonder. In the end, the magic of imagination is not about escaping the real world. It is about transforming it. Mabel didn't ignore reality. She reshaped it, softened it, and filled it with light. Where others saw shadows, she drew stars. Where others saw obstacles, she saw opportunities for creativity. And where others saw just another day, she saw the start of a story. That was her lasting gift. Imagination was not simply a way Mabel lived. It was a way she loved. It was how she showed care, how she built connections, and how she left every place brighter than she found it. In a town filled with mysteries and strangeness, Mabel reminded everyone of the most wonderful mystery of all: the power of a heart that never stops dreaming. The brightness of Mabel's imagination and her endless optimism often painted her as untouchable, as though nothing could dim her light. But even the most radiant souls face moments of doubt, disappointment, and heartache. Beneath the glitter and sweaters, Mabel carried her own quiet struggles. The truth of her journey is that her heart, though strong and giving, was not without trials. And those trials, just like her joys, shaped the sister, friend, and dreamer she became. One of the earliest challenges Mabel faced during that summer was loneliness hidden beneath her cheer. Moving to Gravity Falls, leaving behind her familiar world, meant stepping into uncertainty. Dipper had his journal, his mysteries, his endless curiosity that seemed to anchor him. Mabel, in contrast, had to create her place in this strange town from the ground up. That task demanded not only courage, but also resilience, for loneliness is not always solved by imagination alone. Her longing for connection often expressed itself through her endless search for romance. Mabel believed in love with the same intensity she believed in fun, and she pursued it with a hopeful heart. From summer crushes to fleeting infatuations, she chased after the idea of finding someone who could match her brightness. Yet time and time again, reality pushed back. Some crushes fizzled, others ended in rejection or embarrassment. For Mabel, those moments were not small. They pierced her heart deeply, reminding her that her openness made her vulnerable. But vulnerability was part of what made her so special. Each disappointment hurt, yes, but it also revealed her courage. It takes bravery to dream of love after heartbreak, to hope again after being let down. Mabel's willingness to keep believing, to keep reaching out, was itself a quiet triumph. She showed that resilience is not always about winning battles or conquering fears. It can be as simple as keeping the heart open after it has been wounded. Another trial came from the contrast between her and Dipper. Twins though they were, they often saw the world differently. Dipper leaned into logic, puzzles, and caution. Mabel leaned into feeling, fun, and imagination. Their differences sometimes sparked friction. Mabel could feel overshadowed by his focus or frustrated when he dismissed her ideas as silly. At the same time, she worried about disappointing him, about not being the sister he needed in dangerous or serious times. The trial of her heart in those moments was the struggle to balance who she was with who she thought she needed to be. Yet even in conflict, Mabel's love for Dipper never wavered. That love was her anchor. Even when they clashed, even when she felt uncertain, she returned again and again to the truth that they were stronger together. The pain of their disagreements never broke their bond. It tested it, stretched it, and ultimately proved its strength. Mabel's heart grew through those trials, learning that true love between siblings is not about never fighting, but about always finding the way back to one another. And beyond family and romance, Mabel faced the quiet trial of self-doubt. Though she seemed confident, there were moments when she questioned herself. Was she too silly, too strange, too much? Did others really value her, or were they simply amused by her quirks? These doubts were heavy because they threatened the very foundation of her joyful spirit. To carry glitter into the world requires a belief that the glitter matters. When that belief wavered, Mabel had to wrestle with the possibility that her brightness wasn't enough. Those were the moments that tested her most, because in them, she had to remind herself of a truth she sometimes forgot. Her value was not in being perfect, or in being loved by everyone, or in never stumbling. Her value was in being herself, fully and without apology. It was a lesson she had to learn not once, but many times, through each trial of the heart that summer placed before her. Mabel's journey through the trials of her heart was not marked only by fleeting crushes or sibling disagreements. It was also shaped by her deeper search for belonging. Gravity Falls was strange and unpredictable, a place where mysteries lurked in every shadow. For Dipper, this strangeness provided endless puzzles to solve. For Mabel, it provided endless chances to connect, to find people who would accept her colorful spirit. Yet finding true belonging is never simple. One of the clearest trials was the fleeting nature of her connections. Each new friend or crush brought her excitement, a burst of possibility, but not all stayed. When someone drifted away, Mabel felt it keenly. Her heart was generous. She gave so much of herself in every bond that when those bonds thinned or broke, she felt it as a real loss. Some people might have shrugged off such moments, but Mabel carried them close, because every relationship mattered to her. This was most visible in her crushes, which often began with overwhelming hope. Mabel would imagine entire stories unfolding, picture futures filled with laughter and love. She dreamed of someone who could match her energy, who would see her not as too much, but as exactly enough. Yet those dreams, more often than not, ended abruptly. Each rejection or disappointment stung, not because she lacked resilience, but because she gave so much of her heart to begin with. And every time she had to gather herself, stitch her spirit back together, and try again to believe in love. But these trials taught her resilience in a unique way. Many people learn to guard themselves, to close their hearts after hurt. Mabel chose differently. She chose to remain open, to keep offering kindness, to continue believing in connection. This choice was not weakness. It was strength of a rare kind. It meant facing the possibility of pain again and again, and still choosing hope. That is one of the bravest things a person can do. Her trials were not only about love, however. They also revealed themselves in her fears of being left behind. Dipper's dedication to mysteries sometimes left Mabel feeling like a side character in his story. Though she was always his partner in adventure, she occasionally worried that she mattered less, that her fun and imagination were not as vital as his logic and determination. The trial here was not a lack of love from Dipper. He adored her, but the quiet insecurity that lived in Mabel's own heart. Was she enough? Did her light matter as much as his seriousness? Those questions could weigh heavily. They pressed most strongly in moments when Dipper seemed to choose the journal over her, or when the seriousness of a mystery seemed to demand more than her playful energy could provide. In those times, Mabel's challenge was to see her own worth clearly, to recognize that her heart, her imagination, her joy were not distractions but necessities. It took courage for her to believe that softness had power equal to sharpness, that joy could stand alongside logic as something the world desperately needed. Another layer of her trials came from how others perceived her. Some people dismissed her quirks, called her silly, or underestimated her. While she often brushed such judgments aside with a laugh or a glittery sweater, the truth is that she sometimes absorbed them. Deep inside, she wondered if being herself would ever be fully accepted. The trial here was subtle but constant, the work of holding on to her identity in a world that sometimes tried to dim it. And yet, through all of this, Mabel kept finding ways to turn pain into growth. Her openness to love taught her resilience. Her clashes with Dipper strengthened their bond. Her doubts about belonging sharpened her understanding of self-worth. The very trials that wounded her heart also shaped it, stretching it into something deeper, stronger, more compassionate. The trials of Mabel's heart became most vivid when her optimism, usually unshakable, collided with realities too heavy for even her imagination to easily soften. These were the moments when the glitter dimmed, when laughter caught in her throat, and when she had to face truths she would have rather skipped past. One such trial emerged in the tension between wanting to live in the moment and fearing the future. Mabel thrived in the present. She poured her energy into every day, every laugh, every new adventure. But beneath her playful surface lay an awareness that summers do not last forever. The end of the season, the looming reality of growing up, and the possibility of drifting apart from Dipper pressed against her heart like shadows at the edges of light. She wanted to believe that fun could be endless, that things would never change, yet deep down she knew time was always moving forward. The quiet fear of losing what she loved most was one of her deepest trials. Another came from the rare but painful moments when she and Dipper stood on opposite sides of a choice. Their bond was strong but not unbreakable, and when tension rose, Mabel often felt the weight of guilt and worry. What if her wishes hurt him? What if her need for fun and comfort conflicted with his need for answers? To love someone so dearly and still find yourself at odds with them was a heavy burden. For Mabel, it meant wrestling with questions about loyalty, identity, and sacrifice. Her heart, so eager to give, sometimes struggled to know what giving truly meant. Her search for love also reached its most painful trial when she discovered that not every dream could be saved by hope alone. There were times when she gave her trust too quickly, believing in people who did not deserve it. The sting of betrayal, even in small forms, left marks on her heart. It was one thing to be rejected, but another to feel misled or taken advantage of. These moments tested her faith in others and in herself. Could she keep believing in love without losing her trust? Could she protect her heart without closing it? The balance was delicate, and every misstep left her questioning. Perhaps the most defining trial of Mabel's summer was the moment she felt her world tearing apart. The cracks in her heart widened when she was forced to face that change was inevitable, that even her strongest bonds could be tested by forces beyond her control. Her natural instinct was to hold tightly to joy, to cling to the belief that she could keep everything as it was, yet life demanded otherwise. To accept that truth was to accept that love, even deep love, must sometimes grow by letting go. But even in those darkest moments, Mabel's spirit revealed its resilience. Though she felt pain, though her optimism faltered, she never stayed in despair for long. She cried, yes, she hurt, she doubted. But eventually, she reached again for the tools she always carried: imagination, laughter, and love. These were not escapes, they were lifelines, helping her climb back from heartache into hope. Mabel's trials of the heart, then, were not signs of weakness. They were proof of her humanity. They showed that beneath the bright sweaters and boundless joy was a heart as complex and vulnerable as any. And the fact that she kept choosing kindness, kept choosing hope, kept choosing to love despite everything, was what made her truly remarkable. Every trial Mabel faced, every crack that formed in her heart, carried within it the seed of growth. Pain did not erase her brightness, it sharpened it, teaching her to shine with even greater meaning. The trials of her heart became the quiet lessons that defined her summer and, in many ways, her life. Her moments of rejection taught her that love is not something to be chased desperately, but something to be shared freely, without expectation. She learned that her worth was not measured by whether others chose her, but by the courage she showed in being herself. Each time she recovered from a crush gone wrong, she discovered a little more of her own resilience. Her clashes with Dipper, though painful, taught her the strength of sibling love. Through disagreements, she realized that true closeness is not about avoiding conflict, but about holding on to one another through it. She saw that Dipper valued her, not despite her differences, but because of them. His seriousness needed her joy, just as her playfulness needed his caution. Their bond was not weakened by trials, it was proven by them. Her doubts about belonging, too, carried lessons. Mabel came to see that being too much was never a flaw. Her sweaters, her laughter, her glitter-filled imagination. These were not distractions from the real work of life. They were contributions, vital and irreplaceable. By daring to live with open-hearted joy, she gave others permission to do the same. That realization, though hard-won, deepened her confidence. Even the greatest trial, the fear of change, held its own truth. Mabel discovered that change does not erase love. Seasons end, summers pass, people grow, but the bonds she built, the memories she created, and the joy she shared endured beyond the moment. Her trial became her triumph when she accepted that the heart can stretch, making room for both the pain of goodbye and the hope of tomorrow. Through all of this, Mabel's trials of the heart did not harden her. They softened her in the best way, making her more compassionate, more understanding of others, more attuned to the hidden struggles that even the happiest faces can carry. Her openness, tested but never extinguished, became a kind of quiet strength. She showed that true courage is not found in never being hurt, but in loving fully even after hurt. In the end, Mabel's heart was not defined by its trials alone, but by what those trials revealed. Her boundless resilience, her unwavering loyalty, and her refusal to let sorrow steal her joy. She did not deny her pain. She transformed it, weaving it into the tapestry of her story. And in doing so, she left behind not just memories of laughter and glitter, but the deeper gift of hope. Because the greatest lesson of Mabel's trials is this: The heart is not fragile glass, meant to shatter once and stay broken. The heart is like the sweater she knit, colorful and imperfect, stitched together with love and patched up when torn. Every trial added a new patch to Mabel's heart, making it stronger, warmer, and more beautiful than before. The summer air in Gravity Falls was filled with the hum of cicadas and the gentle glow of fireflies. To most, the little sparks of light flickering in the dark woods were ordinary, but to Mabel Pines, they were a sign that magic existed everywhere. She often imagined each firefly as a tiny lantern keeper, fluttering through the night to guide dreamers home. And in many ways, that is what she was too, a spark in the darkness, a glow in the lives of everyone around her. From the moment she had arrived in Gravity Falls, Mabel carried with her an energy that no shadow could swallow. Where others saw danger, she saw adventure. Where others hesitated, she rushed forward with arms wide open. It wasn't recklessness. It was courage disguised as joy. Her laughter, like a melody that wrapped around the Mystery Shack, became the heartbeat of her summer. Dipper, who carried questions like stones in his pockets, often felt the world growing heavier with each new mystery. But Mabel had the rare gift of reminding him that life was more than puzzles to solve. She showed him that answers mattered, yes, but so did the moments in between. The silly dances, the sweater projects, the times when imagination itself was enough to make a night unforgettable. In Mabel's company, even silence seemed alive, painted with colors of her spirit. Her glow wasn't just in what she did. It was in how she believed. Mabel believed in people, even when they doubted themselves. She believed in laughter, even when fear pressed close. She believed in love, even when the world felt sharp. And because she believed so deeply, others began to believe too. That was the secret of her glow. It was contagious. It spread like warmth from a fire, pulling everyone nearer, softening the chill of uncertainty. At the Mystery Shack, her presence transformed the space. The cluttered shelves of oddities seemed less eerie when decorated with glittering signs she made by hand. The worn couches grew softer when she plopped down beside them with arms full of snacks. Even Stan, who pretended to resist her affection, found his gruff heart slowly melting under the persistence of her hugs. Mabel's glow wasn't loud or forceful. It was gentle, steady. The kind of light that lingers long after the lamp is turned off. But what truly made her spirit remarkable was how it endured in the face of darkness. Gravity Falls was not a safe place. Shadows hid secrets, and creatures prowled the forests. The journals whispered of dangers that stretched far beyond the imagination of most children, and yet Mabel never let fear define her. She acknowledged it, yes, but she chose joy anyway. That choice, again and again, was what made her light so powerful. It was not naive. It was brave. Her glow shaped the rhythm of every day. Morning began with her cheerful exclamations. Afternoons were filled with bursts of creativity, and evenings ended with laughter echoing into the quiet night. Those around her learned to trust in that rhythm, to lean on it, to let it remind them that even when things grew uncertain, there was still beauty to be found. And in the deep hours of night, when worries often crept in, it was Mabel's spirit that kept hope alive. The glow of Mabel's spirit was not a single spark, but a constellation. Each moment she chose kindness became a star. Each time she laughed through fear, another star was born. Each hug, each word of encouragement, each glitter-covered sweater added to the galaxy of light she carried within her. And those around her, whether they realized it or not, were navigating their lives by that constellation. Mabel didn't see herself as extraordinary. To her, she was just being Mabel, crafting, loving, hoping, laughing. But that was the heart of it. Her glow was not about trying to be special. It was about being authentically herself. And in that honesty, she illuminated paths for everyone else. Her spirit shone brightest not because it demanded attention, but because it gave freely. And so, on quiet nights, when the stars above mirrored the stars within her, it became clear. Mabel Pines was more than a girl with a love for color and cheer. She was a beacon, a lantern in the woods, a glow that turned even the strangest summer into something unforgettable. Mabel's glow was not only for family, it reached further, touching friends and even strangers who crossed her path. To Wendy, who often carried herself with an effortless coolness, Mabel's presence was a reminder that playfulness was not something to outgrow. Wendy admired the way Mabel could turn an empty afternoon into a festival, complete with decorations no one asked for, and laughter that needed no reason. She saw in Mabel a kind of courage that was different from her own. Wendy could face down fear without flinching, but Mabel could face it while still finding room to smile. That, Wendy realized, was its own form of bravery. Suze, ever eager to belong, found in Mabel a cheerleader who needed no excuse to show him love. She celebrated his victories, no matter how small, and brushed aside his mistakes with the same warmth she offered everyone. To Suze, her glow meant acceptance, the kind that wrapped around him like a blanket and whispered, "You are enough." It was Mabel who insisted that he was more than just a handyman at the shack. He was family, and those words carried more weight than she might have realized. Even the creatures of Gravity Falls felt her spirit in ways words could hardly capture. A gnome, once plotting schemes in the woods, found itself softened by her relentless kindness. A lumbering monster, feared by others, was given a name, and a backstory in her imagination until it seemed less like a threat and more like a misunderstood neighbor. Mabel's glow extended to those who had no reason to expect it, no claim on her affection. And yet she offered it freely. That was the essence of her gift. No conditions, no limits, only light. Her imagination fueled that glow, turning every challenge into a stage for wonder. When faced with a locked door, she saw not frustration, but an opportunity to invent an elaborate story of hidden treasure waiting inside. When the forest grew dark and foreboding, she spun it into a fairy tale of glowing kingdoms and secret allies. Her mind refused to let shadows remain shadows. She painted them with colors until they became something less frightening, something almost beautiful. That transformation was her magic, taking the uncertain and making it manageable through the lens of joy. For Dipper, this was more than comforting. It was vital. He often carried the burden of mysteries too large for their age, shouldering fears that weighed heavily on his young heart. But with Mabel beside him, the weight lifted, if only a little. Her glow gave him strength to continue, reminded him that even as the mysteries grew darker, there was still light worth fighting for. She was his balance, his anchor, the reminder that solving the puzzle meant nothing without someone to share the story with. In quiet moments, the two would sit side by side, their differences as siblings obvious, but their bond undeniable. Where Dipper traced patterns of stars with logic, naming constellations with precision, Mabel invented new ones with abandon. "That's the sparkle pony," she would declare, pointing to a cluster of stars. "And next to it is the great cupcake of destiny." Dipper would roll his eyes, but secretly he cherished these moments more than any entry in the journals, because while he searched for truth in the stars, Mabel reminded him that sometimes truth was not about facts, but about wonder. Her glow stitched the days of summer together. Each adventure they had, each mystery they uncovered, was threaded with the brightness of her spirit. Without it, the season might have been only shadows, secrets, and fear. With it, the summer became something else entirely, a memory that glowed long after the days themselves were gone. Perhaps what made her glow most powerful was its persistence. Even when things went wrong, when plans fell apart, or when tears welled up, she never let the darkness linger. She felt deeply, yes. Her heart was tender and easily bruised, but she always found her way back to light. Sometimes it was through a new craft project, sometimes through an impulsive joke, and sometimes through nothing more than choosing to hold her brother's hand. She didn't deny the dark. She simply refused to let it win. And in that choice, over and over again, she revealed the true strength of her spirit. It wasn't that she never felt afraid or sad. It was that she chose again and again to believe in joy anyway. That belief was her glow, and it lit every corner of Gravity Falls. The glow of Mabel's spirit was not something that could be contained within walls. It spilled outward like candlelight reaching into the corners of a darkened room. Wherever she went, her brightness left ripples. At the local convenience store, she could turn a mundane errand into a moment of joy, chatting with strangers as though they had been friends for years. At the shack, her laughter carried upstairs and through the halls, softening even the grumpiest moods. In the forest, her footsteps seemed to trail sparks of wonder, transforming fear into curiosity. Grunkle Stan would never admit it out loud, but Mabel's glow reshaped him in ways even he couldn't deny. For so long, he had armored himself against disappointment, hiding behind sarcasm and schemes. But Mabel's relentless affection chipped away at that armor, piece by piece. Her hugs might have seemed casual to her, but to him they were cracks of light in a long, locked room. Slowly, he found himself smiling more, sighing less, allowing tenderness to exist in spaces he had once kept sealed. Mabel didn't set out to change him. She simply loved him as she was, and that was enough to remind him that he was worthy of love in return. Her glow also had a way of reframing failures. Where others saw mistakes, she saw stepping stones. A ruined craft project became abstract art. A failed plan became the setup for a funnier story. Even rejection, which could have crushed someone else, was met with resilience. Their loss, she would shrug, bouncing back into the next idea with unshaken enthusiasm. It was not that disappointment didn't sting her, it did, but she refused to let it define her. That refusal, that insistence on hope, inspired those around her to try again, even after their own setbacks. In the mysteries of Gravity Falls, this resilience became more than a personality trait. It was a survival tool. Dark forces loomed often, and there were nights when even the bravest of hearts faltered. But Mabel's spirit reminded the group that they were more than the fear chasing them. She would crack a joke in the middle of danger, or point out a funny detail no one else noticed, and suddenly the shadows felt less suffocating. Her glow did not erase the threat, but it gave courage to face it. What set Mabel apart was how personal her glow felt. She made each person believe the light was meant especially for them. To Dipper, it was the unwavering faith that he could succeed even when he doubted himself. To Seuss, it was the constant reminder that he belonged. To Wendy, it was the assurance that laughter could be a form of strength. To Stan, it was the quiet proof that family could heal old wounds. Her glow was broad enough to warm everyone, yet intimate enough to feel like a secret gift. It was also creative, constantly shifting form. Sometimes it was loud, bright sweaters, dramatic gestures, bursts of laughter. Other times it was soft, a whispered encouragement, a hand squeezed in reassurance, a smile offered at just the right time. Like sunlight through leaves, her glow could dazzle or comfort depending on what was needed. And in that adaptability lay its true depth. She didn't shine the same way for everyone. She shone in the way they most needed. The longer that summer stretched, the more it became clear that Mabel's glow was not fleeting. It wasn't the product of youth or novelty, but something deeper, an enduring spirit that could not be dimmed by time or circumstance. Even as challenges grew heavier and endings drew near, her brightness held steady. And when others looked back on those months, what lingered most was not the mysteries they solved, but the glow that made it all feel less frightening, more beautiful. Her glow was not just a comfort. It was a call to live fully, to imagine boldly, to love freely. Those who felt it carried the reminder into their own lives, passing it along in gestures both large and small. In that way, Mabel's spirit was not confined to Gravity Falls or to a single summer. It was a legacy, one that continued to shine wherever her story was remembered. Mabel's glow was like the steady flame of a lantern carried through the night, never harsh, never blinding, but enough to guide those who walked beside her. As the summer stretched toward its end, that light became even more precious. The air in Gravity Falls grew heavier with the weight of mysteries unraveling, yet her spirit refused to fade. Where endings loomed, she filled the days with beginnings. Where uncertainty pressed close, she answered with color and laughter. Her glow was not a denial of change, but a way of facing it head-on with courage wrapped in joy. For Dipper, these final days were some of the hardest. He could feel time slipping through his fingers, every sunset a reminder that their summer would not last forever. Worries about the future haunted him, the thought of leaving Gravity Falls tugging at his chest. But Mabel's presence softened that ache. She reminded him that goodbyes were not the end, only the start of another chapter. Her glow steadied him, showing him that while time moves on, love endures. The consolations they had invented together would always shine in their memories, no matter how far apart they might be. Grunkle Stan, too, felt her glow lingering in his own heart. He had spent much of his life chasing after what he had lost, often blind to what was right in front of him. But Mabel's spirit had shown him something simpler, that family wasn't about what was gone, but about what was present. Her glow taught him to cherish the laughter at the dinner table, the chaos of crafts spread across the living room, the hugs he once shrugged away. In her, he found not just a niece, but a teacher, a reminder that healing was possible, even late in life. Wendy carried her glow differently. She tucked it into her smile, into the way she faced her own uncertain future. Watching Mabel live so fearlessly, with joy as her compass, gave Wendy permission to do the same. She realized that strength was not only about bravery and danger, but also about daring to keep wonder alive. With Mabel's glow echoing in her heart, Wendy walked into her own days with a renewed sense of balance, able to be strong without letting go of softness. Even Seuss, whose heart was already wide and open, found it stretched further because of her. Her glow taught him that love could be silly, playful, unpolished, and still be profound. He carried that lesson like a treasure, knowing that his place in the world was not only to fix things, but also to love them, even when they were imperfect. Mabel's glow was more than memory. It was transformation. Those who had walked beside her were not the same people they had been at the start of summer. They were brighter, stronger, softer in ways they hadn't known they needed. That was her true magic. Not solving mysteries, not battling monsters, but leaving people better than she found them. And though summer did eventually end, her glow did not vanish with it. It lived on in stories told and retold, in sweaters folded neatly in drawers, in laughter that returned unexpectedly in quiet rooms. It lingered in the hearts of everyone she touched, carried forward into their futures like a hidden light they could call upon whenever darkness pressed too close. The glow of Mabel's spirit was not bound by time or place. It was not just the story of one girl in one strange town. It was a truth larger than that. The joy can be a kind of bravery, that imagination can be a form of strength, that kindness can be the most enduring magic of all. Her glow was a promise that even in the strangest, darkest corners of life, light can shine, and when it does, it changes everything. And so, with Mabel's glow still shimmering in our thoughts, we bring her journey to a close. She showed us that even in a world full of shadows and mysteries, light is never far away if we choose to carry it. Her laughter, her kindness, and her boundless imagination remind us that the simplest joys can leave the deepest marks. As you drift into sleep, may her spirit guide your dreams, wrapping them in warmth and wonder. Rest well, and let the glow of Mabel's spirit keep you company in the quiet of the night.